Hey, what's going on, pre-Chiro students? This is Dr. Ben once again with a conversation to just explore chiropractic with I dare say, living legend, somebody who has dedicated their life to the profession for many years. I'm super honored to talk with Jay Komarek. Jay, can you just introduce yourself, share your background, your experience in chiropractic, and what your upbringing was like?
Great. Well, good morning, Ben. It's this. I begin my 44th year this year, so that's exciting. Went to Western States Chiropractic College. Grew up in a chiropractic family. I think we have 13 or 14 chiropractors in the family. Pretty solid, philosophically based father in chiropractic. So I got a good start as far as understanding what we were up to in the profession early on. And then he had two brothers. One brother in particular really had quite an impact on me as far as um, the role of structural adjusting. My father was a tonal guy doing tonal work, and for new students, they may not grasp totally what that is. But then they both did structural work, but my father's um, he leaned more toward Logan Basic and tonal work and structural. His brother was a structural chiropractor. So I've had an amazing 44 years. Early on, I had decided to do, um, animals, which really, it brought about an understanding of chiropractic in a way I couldn't have gotten any other way. I couldn't have got it through books or classes. It was just an animal because it was non-verbal. I was able to learn something about the nervous system through an animal that uh, I don't think I could have gotten by any other means.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What attracted you to the animals? And yeah, it almost sounds like similar to a baby, right? They can't necessarily tell you a whole story. They're just a being that, a living organism that you are seeing through the lens of they have a nervous system and they have a body, and I'm going to just check them. So can you just describe like what attracted you to animal chiropractic? And then also, what do you mean when you say structural chiropractic? Because I remember getting adjusted by you. It really opened my eyes to how deep of an adjustment you can deliver in an honoring way. But can you just elaborate a little bit? Like you said, some people might not be familiar with some of these terms you're using.
Right. Well, the first part of your question around the animals, I fell in love with horses at a really early age, and I, um, I remember watching a horse get adjusted when I was younger. My dad's best friend, who since passed away, John Cavallo, was a chiropractor in Easton, Pennsylvania, and I got to watch uh, a horse get adjusted, and I was like, I knew I was leaning toward chiropractic, and then that was just like the icing on the cake. Wow, you can do animals, and I had made a decision early on I would have an animal practice, and I was going to do people. And that once you set your intention, just doors opened for me early in my. This was 1977 and 78. And once I graduated, just doors opened, working for veterinarians and doing horses, and that just blossomed. There was nobody doing work, especially structural work, which is this second part of your question, um, which is that structural adjusting of moving, freeing. I don't like the term alignment. I'm not too big on the concept of aligning the spine. Uh, I do love freeing the spine. That is, there are there's tensions in the system as brought about by the brain, the cerebellum, prefrontal cortex, limbic system that create these structural tensions. And that I'm respectful of the tonal part, and in opening the system tonally first, we're able to deliver forces that will free structures, and then we rely on the innate capability of the nervous system to place that person, that energetic system, in its best possible, in the best possible way, based on many things: the person's mental state, emotional state, metabolic state. So equilibrium and homeostasis is established by innate, and it does it best when the entirety of the structure is free. By that we mean tonally free, that is dynamic, and then structurally free, clearing structural locks that can be really extreme. The extreme being arthritic changes, fibrotic of somebody who's been subluxated their whole life. So,
Mm,
and each of those requires a certain level of understanding of what it means to really free someone. Freeing a child that's got no damage spinally or
mhm,
wise is way different than somebody who's 60 or 70 who's never been adjusted, who's got a huge amount of fibrotic change, and
mhm,
not only going to go through an energetic change, but uh, physically is going to go through quite a bit of change, just moving structures that never been moved before.
mhm. Can you touch on some of the fundamental terms of chiropractic, like subluxation and how you view subluxation, and then innate and how you view innate, and how those relate to chiropractic?
Yeah, that's those are the fundamentals. The fundamental begin with just intelligence that cumulatively at a cellular level, the cell is able to. It's binary. It's opening into the environment and learning and growing and evolving, or it's closing, and that's a binary system. And it's graded. It opens in degrees and it closes. It tends to close quicker than it opens, just because that's the survival nature of a cell. But multiply that cell by 70 trillion, and you have this organized system with all of its systems and structures. And that part of closing can close down and lock structures as a defensive mechanism. It's just survival based. The the locking down, the structural locks of the system, we refer to as subluxation. We've got them kind of, in chiropractic, we've focused on the upper cervical spine, and has a lot to do with just the anatomy of the brainstem and meninges attached to structures at the base of the skull. But um, and then we then have these other things that happen, these fixations that are compensatory changes.
Mhm,
But first it's neural. Then, when anything's happening, you're seeing me, hearing me, feeling me, sensing me. That's neural. And the system is either okay with that and it's open and it's taking all that information and growing and evolving. Or if I do something to shock you or scare you or frighten you, the system will close down. That's the binary flip side of it. And
mhm,
that can do it in an extreme way, where we create this neurologic lock. If you do it long enough, those pathways habituate, they stay stuck. It becomes you as a way of life, and the
mhm,
structure then locks down.
mhm,
And so our job is twofold. It's not just the structural thing of moving a bone or popping a bone, but neurally re-educating a nervous system that's subluxated. The nervous system's in a state of fight or flight or fear, and all the emotional components that lock, and behaviorally that person's living that way. You have to then open that and then structurally recreate freedom for them, and in all the ways that that can happen. There's lots of dynamics there.
mhm, absolutely. Can you speak to a prospective student about kind of how to begin their exploration of chiropractic? Is it on the table in a practice? Is it in a green book? Is it in a newer that you like? Is it watching the documentary that you were in called Life Adjusted? And where do they kind of like go from there? Like, how can we keep them connected to that you just described as much as possible early on?
Well, I think it begins with something as simple as looking up the word, looking up these fundamental words of what does the word holistic mean, which was only coined in the 70s. And what does vitalism mean? What does holistic mean? And just these fundamental concepts. and then what groups what groups uh, as far as the delivery of care service those ideas. That is, chiropractic is focused around allowing the body, helping the body to express its own intelligence and restore itself to dynamic equilibrium. And our sole focus is that. So there's these very basic concepts of how is this different from medicine, and so there are many books that touch on this, but it helps to be with or talk with someone who can help you work through this, which
Mhm.
is the concept of um, outside in versus inside out. That in chiropractic, we're saying, look, we're going to free your nervous system. What does that mean, freeing a nervous system? Well, nervous system can be in a state of fight or flight, which begets a certain chemistry, that we can just wormhole into that whole universe so that the nervous system can lock down. We know, and it then can cascade in a certain chemical path. And and then there's the flip side of that, an open nervous system, a nervous system that's open and free and able to adapt. We can talk about fundamental concepts of adaptation. What does the word, excuse me, Ben, the door just flew open from the wind and snow.
Awesome. Do your thing. No worries. That's why we have video editors.
Um, so we have, it begins with vocabulary. So we need a good vocab class. Adaptation, uh, dynamic equilibrium, these fundamental words that then we build on into a philosophy of, if we say the term outside in, inside out, that's not a scientific term, but it's a way we describe the way people have been managed, the way that we've managed healthcare. So
Mhm.
you have a doctor who thinks, look, I'm going to give you a COVID injection, or, and I'm going to affect something in the immune system in a positive way, hopefully. And chiropractic is saying, look, before we do that, possibly we want to maximize the potential of an individual because of a thing called innate intelligence. And so just the word innate, we could spend probably a month talking about how did innate intelligence come about. You're talking about millions of years of cellular adaptation through trial and error that allows a cell to adapt to an environment, and it does it amazingly well. And if that weren't the case, man would have died off on the planet many, many years ago.
Mhm.
But the cell adapts and is capable of adapting, and
Mhm.
our job is to help the cell adapt to an ever-changing environment, which is
Mhm.
what, for me, what health means. That
Mhm.
vibrancy and adaptation, and that's a neural response, which then cascades into chemistry and all the nine functions of a cell.
Yeah, you're someone who's a lifelong learner. I remember hearing just a few years ago you had gone back to the Carrick Institute to study neurology after you'd already been in practice for 20 or 30 years. Can you just touch on, in reflection, some of the different things that you've explored within the context of chiropractic studies or through the lens that you see things that have helped you in just staying engaged professionally and just staying inspired from within?
Well, that's really the key to a long career is inspiration. That you stay inspired, and you want to study. You want to study chemistry, maybe you study fasting, or you go take a nutrition class. And we could just talk about elimination, right? We could just talk about cellular elimination.
Where'd you go?
Yeah,
Oh, there you go. Hold on. We lost. We
yeah,
we we went into a bit of a
yeah,
tailspin there with the internet connection, which is okay, no problems.
yeah,
Uh,
like a heavy snowstorm out here with wind.
awesome,
I think
awesome. Sounds good. You're back with us in full effect. You said we could talk about elimination.
Yeah, you could pick anything. It's so, when you have the core philosophy of chiropractic, and everything lends itself to helping someone. So, we want to talk about cleansing, you want to talk about hydration, but all of those things make most sense when you understand the nervous system, that the brain and cord, spinal cord, and the nerves are directing the cells to do what they do, and they do it best when the nervous system is free to do it. It's not, the nervous system is not tracking in a given way. Um, and this fundamental concept that the nervous system can go into fight or flight and stay there. It can lock there. I think that's a big misunderstanding. People don't realize that you can start tracking in that way, chemically, neurologically, metabolically, and you are then stuck in those pathways unless you make an effort to countermand that, which is through breath, through yoga, through meditation, through chiropractic, those things that open a nervous system that allow it to be free in the present moment. So neurology for me is it. I started chiropractic college at Texas Chiropractic College, and our first year was heavy into the central nervous system, and the fact that this amazing structure was directing all the function, and it did it in a very intelligent way,
Mm,
even though it's destructive over a long time. A fight or flight response or a sympathetic response is exactly the response needed based on the perceptions of the nervous system. So, but you don't want to, you don't want to be running away from a lion for the rest of your life. You may do it for 5 minutes. You just don't want to do it forever.
mhm,
And a lot of people live as if they're running away from a lion, and chiropractic can help reverse that process by
mhm,
opening up to the possibility of a full breath. What does a full
mhm,
breath have to do with subluxation, this term of the central nervous system locking down, the structure locking down, and the diaphragm not being able to open? So here we could just talk about breathing and its relationship to subluxation, and breath alone being a doorway to clearing subluxation, not even having anything to do with putting our hands on the structure, just getting someone to open their breath and showing them how shut down they can be breath wise. So
mhm.
so many avenues.
How does the experience change if you're working with a horse or a human? How does that experience change, or how do you track change, or what are you paying attention to? What are you observing in the organisms that you work with as a chiropractor?
That's a wonderful question. With the horse, it's obviously it's nonverbal, but there's a communication taking place there, and there's definitely a language, which is tonal. Which again, I uh, I understood tone in the human realm, but with working with animals, I realized there's a whole nother level of tone, understanding of tone, and um, the animals the animals taught me, one, that I had to be comfortable in my own being in order to work with a horse. If you're working with a thoroughbred, that tends to have a very high tone, very acute awareness of its environment, very speedy. It's got a very, as opposed to a warm blood where the nervous system is a little more docile. But I've learned how you are and how you show up has as much to do with your understanding of the mechanics or your technique. Just having a nervous system that's able to be in present time with an animal is the key to opening up care, to opening up to really good care. So the animals, I learned the depth of tone with with a horse, that how I showed up in terms of my vibratory rate and my breath and my touch was huge, in addition to just the mechanics of moving a 1,200-pound horse and having them want to do it. Just,
Mhm.
take a horse's head that's, 150 pounds and start turning it. Um, have them want to do that with you and then having them accept the delivery of force and force application.
Mhm.
So the animals were a great learning for me. The things I look for are tonal qualities, high tone, low tone in terms of tensions. And we're talking about just the surface tensions of the skin, and then fascia, and then muscle, and tendon and ligament, and then joint restriction. And there's just all these levels that you can go into. And you learn just general tone of, you're feeling the butt of a horse, and that tone is different than the shoulder, let's say. And we want equanimity, we want the whole thing being equal in its tonal responses. But you can have tonal systems that are way out of whack in people and in animals. So I'm trying to create equilibrium throughout the whole system, in addition to the movement of having movement being free and dynamic.
Mhm. Mhm. And so, what's the timeline look like when you're working with horses or you're working with humans? How much time are you spending with them? How many times are you seeing them? Over what period of time are you seeing them? And how do you relate time to the care that you're providing?
Well, I always I've used this over the years. When I go to a light switch, and I with children, you'll learn this. When I turn the light switch on, I don't have to stand there rubbing the light plate afterwards. And there are certain neural responses that are immediate in a horse. And if you're looking for just the ability of a nervous system to downregulate and come into balance, that can take place in a matter of a minute, in seconds in some cases. And then you have these other things that are happening where there's damage. Let's say somebody's got damage of the spine due to arthritic change or disc pressures or fibrotic changes. Then, excuse me, depending on the extent of that, you're then mapping out how long will that take
Mhm.
to not clear the nervous system. Sometimes clearing the nervous system is actually pretty quick, but the actual physiologic changes that need to happen, if possible, um, that just can take a while. So it's on a per person basis.
Mhm.
Children, sometimes I adjust a child, and it's one adjustment, the kid's free. And
Mhm.
then I've got people, and there's 80s and 90s who it takes a little bit longer just because they're hardwired. And
Mhm.
dude may not understand what hardwiring is, but hardwiring is that when mentally, emotionally, chemically, structurally, the system has become its pattern. That is, they got subluxated, they got traumatized, they got locked, and then mentally, emotionally, behaviorally, their whole life evolved around that. That takes a while to undo those things.
Mhm. Hmm. Yes, it does. So, can you actually talk about the role that trauma plays in life and how I've heard you reference Hans Selye and the stress response and just how important it is to understand trauma and how you mentioned mental, emotional, physically, it shows up in someone's life and how we work with people that have trauma and how important it is to see chiropractic as an essential sort of vehicle to transform that trauma into something else?
It's wonderful. Again, a good many people have been traumatized right from the get-go, depending on the birthing process. So, chiropractic was really at the forefront of understanding that you had this delicate nervous system that grew this amazing structure in utero, and then in the birthing process could have a trauma based on a forceps or vacuum extraction or cesarean, which are really huge shocks to an organism. And we always describe it as like having a greasy hand and putting it on a window, and for the rest of your life you're going to look out that window through that greasy handprint. And an infant who's been traumatized is looking through a greasy handprint of trauma. And so what does that mean? It means a lot of things, but neurologically it means that the the nervous system is stimulating a cell to be protected, which is actually a contractile force. that's in and closing, which restricts breath. And when that happens, the chemistry cascades in a certain direction. We
Mhm.
know that when a human is traumatized and or in the state of fear, their prefrontal cortex gets very, very busy, and they start relating that to other stories in their cortex, and then it fires into their limbic system and starts cascading a sympathetic reaction. When that is on overwhelm, your part of your brain, your cerebellum, its ability to coordinate free dynamic movement, that all goes out the window.
Mhm.
People start folding in on each other, start contracting and distorting. And when you think about the role of chiropractic, it is so big in terms of unwinding all of these aspects. You just look at the physiologic aspects of contraction and folding. Now we have the polyvagal theory, so we know that it's fold and flex and freeze, and it goes through these layers of defense, which is really trauma. And with it, behaviorally and mentally, the person develops certain attitudes and beliefs, and their choices are affected by all of this. So, when you think about chiropractic, it's, people think it's, you're just popping a bone. It's so funny because chiropractic is so comprehensive, and it's when you understand the philosophy and the role of what a chiropractor does to restore a nervous system back to normal function.
Mhm.
Very, very big.
Can you reflect on some of the stories that stand out in your mind where you were able to reconnect somebody back to themselves and they were more living from an inside out way of being as opposed to when you first met them? Just anything off the top of your head come to mind, or what's possible when you have that connection restored and maintained by a chiropractor over time?
Yeah, after it's tens of thousands of people at this stage of the game, and there's so many stories. So we can take a look at crisis care of somebody who's been hurled through the windshield of a car, or a veteran who had his legs blown off, and then hooking them back up. I have a veteran now, and that I'm taking care of, who, I mean, was on several tours in Afghanistan, and it's a horrific. People have no clue how horrific it is to see someone, your best friend, blown up and parts of their body all over the place. And how do you bring yourself back into some sense of normalcy, and if that's possible. And we start that process by helping them with their nervous system, which got insulted, and then obviously counseling and breath work. There's so many other things that are necessary, but chiropractic is crucial to that. So I in the 70s and 80s, I did a lot of veterans, and there's just amazing stories of all of a sudden someone feeling peace for the first time by receiving chiropractic care, or someone actually touching them in a way that's a loving, caring, non-sexual. You're caring for someone with human touch who has just armored, and so gently we're working in that way.
Mhm.
So on one end we have trauma and the extremes of that, which for me were veterans or people who've been abused, or the number of women who've had sexual abuse. And so someone being able to take them from this locked place into open, and is quite a gift to be able to deliver. And then on the other side of the trauma, we have people who are seeking wellness care that is trying to maximize their life force and their expression. And for me, I was always challenged by the crisis, the person who had been in trauma, and I became very good at that, of dealing with someone who had the extremes. I have a young boy who drowned in a pool at age 3, and he lived to be 8. And but at age 3, he had drowned, was totally closed in. his parents kept him alive through feeding tubes and breathing tubes. And when he received his first, he had been that way for uh, a year before I got to see him. And I started to adjust him, and his eyes opened, and he recognized his mother and started to gyrate his mother. Now, it wasn't normal movement as we know it, but the mother knew, oh, he's in there. He's aware of me. And chiropractic opening that channel for her and him to have a communication, which they had for 5 years before he passed. Um, I mean, what a gift, and the moment he'd be there and the moment the mother would walk in the room, his nervous system would start to move. And that to that woman and her husband, and that was a chiropractic adjustment that opened that up so that his communication, in what limited fashion it was able to communicate with them until he crossed over.
Mm.
So there's his name is Ryan, and there are just hundreds of stories of somebody who's been living in a shell or a box or just in in black and white, goes from black and white to full on color. It's a very amazing thing to do for somebody, or a horse. If you watch the movie Life Adjusted, you have a horse like Dizzy that somebody beat it with a baseball bat. It was like, the craziness of people. And then, we just have all these extremes. So, we're able to help people open and experience life. And, it's, pretty magical.
Yeah, it is magical. I think that's like the core message is if you're going to become a chiropractor, you can help people of all walks of life at different stages of their life, in different scenarios that they're going through. It doesn't really matter if you understand the philosophy, if you understand the system and how to work with it, and really just start to see people from this trusting place that it makes a huge impact on their life and on their expression, and it's a joy to do. I mean, it sounds very creative and dynamic and nonlinear, and there's very few things out there in this world that allow you the creativity to like artistically express yourself in working with another human being with just your hands most often, right? I mean, you're not using any equipment throughout all these different experiences you're talking about. It's just your hands, right?
Just my hands.
Wow.
Again, I just, the artistic part that's the part besides, that you get to be creative, because once you understand the neurology, the physiology, the biomechanics, the mental and emotional components of how behaviorally people spiral into different, then you get to, then it's challenging, and it's also fun because what the end game is. The end game is neurologic open freedom, that joy, happiness for that person. And you can see where people get stymied and stuck, physically stuck or mentally or emotionally. They have these mental fixations that you can help them through, and you realize the end game is freedom.
Mhm.
So then it's just challenging, and it can be very not as challenging with horses, surprisingly, or a dog, because they don't hold on to a story like a human does. The human
Mhm.
will hold on to their narrative. It becomes them. And so helping a person let go of their narrative to allow what's happening in the present moment, that's a challenge. It's a challenge, but fun.
It sounds like it. If you've been involved in that practice for so long, then you must have some fun with it. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah.
it's great times.
Yeah.
How would people study animal chiropractic? Do you have a program that you recommend, and what is that program? Can you get into the details of like what that program,
Right.
how long it is, and what the qualifications are, and um, just what it allows you to do?
The you either have to be a chiropractor or a veterinarian, and then you can go take a certification program, which are usually 6 modules, 5, 6 modules, or 220 to 30 hours of continuing education that's specific to the anatomy of a horse or a dog or cat. And then that you then test out with one of two organizations, the American Veterinary Chiropractic Association or the International Veterinary Chiropractic Association, and you then take your exam, and then that's a beginning, and then you come to us to do advanced training, um, with stuff that we just learned over 44 years of, that make your job a whole lot easier once you understand how to work with. So um, you have to be a vet or a chiropractor. You can start taking your classes in your final year of chiropractic. You can't test out until you graduate. You can't actually get your certification until you've completed your chiropractic education, but you can start your classes in your final year.
Mhm.
And so really, I would have to say the longevity of my career was as a result of horses. That is, this morning, although it's snowing really bad, I probably won't go. I had horses this morning to go do, and we'll probably wait till it's, the weather changes. But, it's the horses and dogs are it's very, very wonderful work. And
Mm,
I had a case last week. They brought the dog in, and the dog had jumped off a cliff. The
mm,
dog had splayed its legs out and subluxated its fifth and sixth cervical and dislocated one of its shoulders, which
mm,
was actually dislocated. And the vet didn't know how to reset it. So they brought the dog to me, and I had to get the owner to grab the leg. And I said, I'm going to, on the count of three, I want you to pull the leg as hard as you can. And I had to put my hand on the humeral head and set it in the joint. And the dog let out this yipe, and then 10 seconds later was running around, was so excited. We had
mm,
been walking around for a couple of weeks with a dislocated shoulder,
mm,
and its cervicals subluxated. And,
mm.
to be able to do that and see the immediate excitement of a dog. And with a horse, people don't realize a horse will smile at you. They'll literally turn around and smile at you after they've been cleared, which is really, for a veterinarian who doesn't see this and all of a sudden sees a horse do something like that, it just changes their perception of what their work is about.
Mhm, mhm. Last question. What do you think about the future of chiropractic? If I'm a young student, I'm thinking to go become a chiropractor. Would you recommend it? What are some of the unique challenges that students today are facing? And do you have any strategies on how they can better adapt to the future of being a chiropractor, or do they just need to trust the process?
Well, that's yes. It's a wonderful profession. My issues lie with the costs of them going to school and coming out with debt. That the debt in itself of an educational process will shape shift you in a certain way that may take you off of what your initial philosophical desire was, your desire to really express and deliver chiropractic. And you may wind up having to shift that if you're not really clear on what you're up to. So um, the there is cost considerations that I think students really need to consider. The second thing, it's amazing career. Like, it's so deeply satisfying and rewarding, and financially, it's very, very rewarding. I've had an amazing, it's very, very rewarding chiropractic. So, in a financial sense, as far as a lifestyle for yourself, and you
Mhm,
get to work as much or as little as you want, and um, it will challenge you. I think it brings out the best in people. I think that if you're committed to service, brings out the best in you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, challenges you mentally in terms of thinking comprehensively. You use the term nonlinear. It's, you need to understand physics, you need to understand chemistry, you need to understand neurology. There's all these things, and if you're dedicated to it, you just little by little start building this understanding, and pretty exciting. So
mhm.
yes, I'm you go for it, and hopefully you've got somebody can help you out financially, or the you find a way to do it so that you're not burdened when you get
Mhm.
to school.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back with the financial piece to the fact that medical school is the same amount, if not more. Same thing with physical therapy school. Same thing with a lot of the different programs that are graduate school. Law school is expensive, And student debt, for whatever reason, has become such a big thing for us in society. And the future is really about what's going to fulfill you the most. So to me, that's more important than how much debt you come out with. When in reality, we're all going to have some sort of debt, regardless of which path we choose. I mean, there is a path of no debt, but it's not very easy to just start there. You eventually get there. It's not it's not the
Yeah.
starting point. And
When when you look at a 44-year career and you amortize that cost over time, it's nominal. And
yeah,
when you think about what the potential is of your income yearly, I mean, it's really it seems overwhelming, especially if you've been making $12 an hour or $15 an hour, and all of a sudden you're looking at $250,000 of debt. But over time, it's 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 to be considered, but
hmm hmm
it's well worth the effort.
hmm Thank you so much, Jay. Much appreciation to you for everything you've done for me and just allowing me to grow my skills, grow myself into a professional, and go out into the world upon graduating and be able to serve at the level that I've been able to. It means a lot. And I just appreciate being able to represent you on this podcast for any young students, any high school students, to be able to hear from you is just really important to me to carry on that legacy and also just to honor that lineage that I come from. So thank you for your time. You're appreciated. And
Happy to do it, Ben. This is a lot of fun this morning.
absolutely.